Honorable members and this House memories that this report was tabled by the delegation which represent the National Assembly in Pan-African Parliament, and as per our standing order number 212, my Committee on Regional Integration is mandated to examine all debates, all reports, all records of East African Legislative Assembly, IALA, Pan-African Parliament, the Pacific and Caribbean, and any other joint assembly. And as such, this report, after it was tabled, was marked to my committee for examination. And for that reason, for record, the report that I tabled yesterday is not the report from Pan-African Parliament, but the report of my committee on the observation after the examination as per the standing order. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, I was just putting 2-3 observations that my committee made, but before then, I thought it's good to refresh Honorable members' memory by indicating that Pan-African Parliament is a legislative body of African Union comprised of over 200 members from over 50 member states who have signed the protocol of Pan-African Parliament. The Pan-African Parliament mainly its objective is to promote democracy, to promote human rights, and to accelerate human capital, social and economic development. In Article 3, Honorable Speaker, I already mentioned that the Pan-African Parliament main mandate is again to promote the African Union agenda, but I did put a disclaimer on that Article 3, some point where they say the Pan-African Parliament should promote economic integration, ensuring representation of women and youth in the decision-making process. And I did urge our team, which represent us in South Africa, that going forward in future, they should make a recommendation that the representation should be termed as inclusive, so that it do include also all sort of groups, including persons living with disability. Honorable Speaker, the main aim why the standing order was drafted that this kind of report should be sent to my committee for examination is because Regional Integration Committee deal with regional integration matters and to the extent of the whole African region. And as such, we may observe a gap. We may observe bilateral talks that could be going at African continent level, which are also fundamental to EAC or other regional bloc. During our deliberation in my committee, yes, we did observe some gaps. For instance, we found that in this report, the Pan-African Parliament had a motion on calling the African Union to fast track the peace and stability in DRC Congo. The gap we found as a committee is that the mandate of Pan-African Parliament is to make a recommendation to African Union. But then these recommendations are not binding. So to me and the committee, it beats the logic. Why then they would recommend that peace and stability be fast-tracked in DRC Congo, yet a whole Pan-African Parliament, which is comprised of over 200 members, who are representing about 5 regional blocks, cannot have a binding argument on the floor of the House. So that is why it is important for such reports to come to us. That is one observation that we made. They did that very well, which was very timely. Could they be sitting today? I'm sure they would be pointing out that African Union also and IGAD fast track the peace and stability in the Republic of Sudan. We also observed, the Honorable Speaker, and this will come from our experience on Pan-African Parliament around 2021, that the leadership of African Union have recommended that the leadership of Pan-African Parliament be on rotational basis. I think as a committee we welcome this because we remember the stalemate that was there. And I already mentioned again that it is common for statement to be in any parliament. Honorable Speaker, when we were in inception in this house, we also struggled, even when we could count Kenya Kwanza members were more than the other team who are the majority, and we were on statement. During year 4, we were not able to elect a speaker until mediation happened in Arusha. So it is normal for any parliament to be on stalemate, and could we find a better solution and resolution to handle the matter, like in the wisdom of African Union, like this rotational basis, it is much welcomed. However, as a committee, as we observe this, we also urge our team who represent us that they must be clear on terms of reference. Because, Honorable Speaker, I think currently we have 55 member states in African Union. So if you are going on rotation and even not expurging the countries that already had leadership, that can take us hundreds of years, and maybe country Kenya may never lead for the next 200 years. So these are terms of reference that the team in South Africa should be very clear. They must see how to do away with the countries that have already held the leadership. They must put the time in terms of time frame, and they may even consider to go alphabetically or any way of their choice. Finally, Honorable Speaker, we also observed that the membership of Pan-African Parliament is aimed to be elected on universal suffrage, and the leadership is aiming at doing away with getting membership from Parliament. We observed this, and Honorable Speaker, we feel as a committee that in future, the delegation which represent Pan-African Parliament should emanate from Regional Integration Committee. Why do I say this? We are given this report to interact with it, and when you interact with the paper, you cannot make clarification. For instance, on that universal suffrage for the membership of Pan-African Parliament, the committee had whole and hundreds of questions on clarification. When we intended to call the membership or the delegation to our committee, again we are limited by the standing order, because we cannot summon fellow members to our committee unless we invite them on friendly basis. And when we invite them on friendly basis, Honorable Speaker, again that is not formal. So we find ourselves in difficulties as a committee examining this report, and therefore we continue to urge the leadership of this House to consider in future. We know these nominations are political, and politically anyone...
Wanjiku, that is a very important point you're making.
And
luckily the majority leader of the House, not of the majority side, and the majority whip are in the House. I would wish that in as much as they are consulting, they not even to consult in low tones, but at least they heed the point you're making. Yeah, thank you.
Honorable Speaker, I would not mind to repeat myself. I was expressing the need to interact with the people, and I was stating that in future, the Pan-African Parliament membership should be drawn from Committee of Regional Integration, because when we have an issue like the Pan-African Parliament leadership aims at getting the membership through universal suffrage, as a committee we want to examine more and have clarification, but we cannot make clarification from the papers. Noting that these nominations are political, they can be elected in any way by any political party, but then they come from the Committee of Regional Integration, so that when we are interacting, we can have further clarifications with the team. Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, I would say that the African Union vision of 2063, which I mentioned that the men in this House would be glad to hear this sentence, it is to drive African through African citizens by making ourselves as Africans key players internationally, be it in trade, be it in economic, be it in human rights. And as such, Honorable Speaker, I wish to say that this report be adopted by this House, having been examined by our committee, and we hope in future we can even do better. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Wanjiku, Muhia, the Honorable Mutembei, MP for Kitui East.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak to the report on examination by the Committee of National Integration on the report from our representatives to the Pan-African Parliament. Mr. Speaker, as the chair has alluded, some things are very disturbing. It is very disturbing to note that